Hi everyone, welcome to the 8 p.m. show with Lakshmi Praturi on Insta Live. One of the things I've been thinking a lot about during this COVID times is, this all started as, there's going to be a shutdown, there's going to be for like 2 weeks, and then we're all going to go back to normal. Even initially, we just acted as though everything was normal. We walked around with no masks and, still talked to people and all that stuff. And then each day we started realizing that it's more and more serious, it's more and more long-term, it's more and more the reality, the new reality, or whatever you want to call it. And so we are in a situation today where whatever it is, whatever we are doing today, this may be it for the next few months. So one of the things everybody is watching out for is maybe a drug, maybe a way to stop this permanently, maybe a way to stop it temporarily, maybe different ways to test ourselves. So pharma has been at the center of a lot of research, a lot of conversations, possibility of a vaccine or a medicine, etc. So we thought that today we should talk with somebody from the pharma sector and also somebody who is sitting in Spain. So, as we all know, Spain has been eye of the storm a little bit, and we've been looking to, what are the numbers have been going up there, and etc. So we have Saurabh Gurnurkar, who's from UQUIFA Group, and hey, Saurabh.
Hi, Lakshmi. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing fine.
Okay. I was just telling everybody about you're in Spain, the eye of the storm a little bit in the past few months, and we were actually supposed to be there in April and had to change our plans, as you can imagine. So I thought that you might come back to India because of this, but you stuck it out there and etc. So I thought, sort of, tell us a little bit about, you're in the pharma industry, which is essential, which is considered essential industry, obviously. And you guys make various types of ingredients for anti-ulcer, antiviral, and retroviral, all kinds of things. So I thought maybe just take a couple of minutes, tell us what you do. What does your company do? And you're spread over Spain, Mexico. What are all the areas you look after?
Sure. No, thank you for having me. And I think as a means of introducing ourselves, let me do that first. So I represent UQUIFA. UQUIFA is a Barcelona headquartered active pharmaceutical ingredient manufacturer. UQUIFA is a 80-year-old enterprise. I mean, it started way back in the late 1930s, and it started as a public sector enterprise in Spain, moved different ownership hands, etc. But the essence is that this company has been in the business of making active ingredients for a long period of time. And if you look at us today, in terms of where we are present, UQUIFA is manufacturing in Spain, in Mexico, in Hungary, and we're a team of nearly 700 people across these locations. I should also tell you about what is it that we exactly do, right? So if you look at
can you just tilt down your phone? We can see only like part of your face.
Is this fine? Is this fine?
Yes, much
Perfect.
better.
Okay.
If you can tilt it a little bit more, we can see a little bit more of you.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's about what I can do, right?
That's perfect.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, let me quickly tell you about what we do and where we are actually positioned in the whole pharmaceutical industry. So, if you look at the drugs which you and I consume, be it a tablet or be it a capsule, be it ointment or injection, there is one particular ingredient which is called the active pharmaceutical ingredient, which gives the efficacy of the formulation, right? So that's what causes the formulation to be effective. So the business of UQUIFA is manufacturing those active ingredients, right? So these active ingredients can be 5%, 25%, or 35% of the cost of a finished drug, or the volume of a finished drug. But they are a very critical part of the supply chain because that's what causes the efficacy of the formulation in a sense. And as you said, we make active ingredients for a range of therapies. We make active ingredients for products which have an antiviral application, antiretroviral application, dermatology, ophthalmics, and even certain controlled substances as well. So that's the business of UQUIFA, and obviously we run it across these locations like Spain, Mexico, and Hungary, where we have manufacturing sites. And our customer base are the finished formulation companies. So we sell largely to the US and Europe, which is more than 85% of our sales turnover. And some of the leading customers which we have are names like GlaxoSmithKline, Pfizer, Gilead Life Sciences. In fact, one of the companies which you mentioned too in your introduction as to one of the front runners for trying to find a treatment for this COVID. So they are a significant customer for us. So is a name like Zoetis, which is more on the veterinary side. And you have the regular suspects like Allergan or Teva as well, which are large customers for us. So I think if there's anything else specific you want me to talk about, I'm happy to do it. But that's in a sense what we do.
You said you manufacture and you're in Spain, you're in Mexico, different places. So it's sort of your factories at all these places which manufacture different ingredients, and you oversee all of them right now?
That's correct. So we are headquartered in Barcelona, and clearly, we run this as a independent professional business organization, and we have different SBUs. So, there is a Spanish business unit, there is a Mexican business unit, and there's obviously the latest entrant into our family as such as Hungary, because it's a recent acquisition, which we completed just 2 years ago. So in a sense, we are headquartered in Barcelona, and clearly we have local teams whom we work with on a daily basis, but the corporate office is right in Barcelona.
Yeah. So one of the things, the reasons I wanted to talk to you about is, in this time of COVID, especially, in Spain, it has been a lot of, there've been a lot of deaths, etc. So, and you are you running all your factories at full capacity? What sort of adjustments did you have to make in terms of social distancing and stuff like that? Tell us a little bit about what it is to be in the middle of all this and still run a full business.
Yeah, I think so. Clearly, I think from the perspective of how COVID has impacted this country, it's been pretty significant. I think the death toll is in excess of 25,000 people, and the mortality rate here has been close to 10%, which is probably one of the higher of what we're seeing in different countries. So clearly, the country has taken an impact in terms of the loss of human life and obviously the loss of economic activity. Coming to our business, we are in the pharmaceutical sector, so we are classified as an essential industry. So clearly we have been allowed to operate. I think the first couple of weeks, and when I say first couple of weeks, I'm talking about probably the second and third week of March, which is when all this sort of became very significant. We had quite a bit of restrictions in terms of how we could operate. But I think the government here sort of made or refined the rules in terms of what could be done and what couldn't be done. And we were in the essential industry, so we were able to run our factories in as normal a fashion as possible. And clearly we had problems in moving goods or sending our finished product to ports or to end customers. I think we suffered for a couple of weeks on lieu of that, but we were able to with the help of the government sort of streamline things. So pharmaceutical has been one of the sectors where we have had pretty reasonable working in terms of whatever you define the new normal as in today's world. So we've been able to do that. Clearly, we've not been able to work 100% because the advisories of the government and also the industry body which we are a part of clearly mandates us that we need to segregate the sensitive age groups and the sensitive health conditions. So in a sense, in Spain and in Mexico and Hungary, we've probably ended up being in a situation where 10 to 15% of our workforce falls in this category, and clearly we have allowed them to be at home. And apart from production and quality assurance, which are required to be on the manufacturing sites, to the extent possible, we have moved most of the other functions to work from home sort of model. So, well,
So Murugesh, asking from one of our viewers about the problems with the laborers. A lot of people are worried about how will the labor react, or how can they, maintain a certain health standard at home or travel. Because I don't know how it is there. Is all the public transportation still there or not? Because here there is no public transportation at all in India.
Well,
depends on where you are, but how do you, what percent of your employees are actually like a blue collar labor that depend on public transportation and things like that? What sort of issues are you having there?
So I think if you look at our sites, I could take the example of Spain, since we are pretty much first time being here. The production workforce as a whole part of the total employee base is probably around 20 to 25%. Right, that's what we have in terms of who we need to be on ground every day, at least 3 shifts a day, to make sure that the factory runs and we're able to deliver some product to our customers and the patient base. Right, so that's the minimum which we have. I think what's probably worked in our favor is that both our sites are on the outskirts of Barcelona. So they're like in smaller towns which are on the suburbs of Barcelona. And a large part of our employees, especially the blue collar, or especially the people who are on the production workforce, live very close by. So they don't really have to partake of public transport to get to the site. So I think that's probably helped us in a sense as well, because here too, I think as in India, we've had public transport very, very curtailed. It's not banned. You can still get a metro. You can still get a bus, especially in the last couple of weeks or so. But the frequency is much, much lower compared to earlier.
So, Mohan is asking, how is your managing the supply chain? Yes, you're getting them, but the materials that are supplied to you, how has it been? Are they all on time? Is everybody in the ecosystem on the essential services mode and functioning fully?
That's an interesting question. In fact, it's a sort of a loaded question as well, because from our perspective, we buy most of our raw materials. If I could tell you, maybe 60% from China, 40% from India. This is of the main raw materials. There's a lot of other stuff which we buy, solvents, reagents, which we procure locally within Europe, which has not been such a problem, except the first 2 weeks. So it's been pretty normal. But clearly, the more important stuff comes out of China and comes out of India, even from our perspective. So that's where we've had issues. And clearly, we've had first beginning from China in the months of January and February. Towards the early part of March, we've had delays in terms of shipments, because they had ports not working, airports not working, factories not working. So we've clearly taken a hit in terms of late arrivals and losing our production capacity. That's definitely happened. But what I can also tell you is that the situation from China has improved significantly over the last 4 weeks. Okay, so they now ship stuff. We are able to get confirmations of product leaving from their end. We have been able to receive them in the ports here in Barcelona or Mexico or Budapest, wherever. And we've been able to clear the stuff and move it to our factories. So that's happened. I think China has, in 4 weeks, has changed a lot. So it's as close to normal as possible. I could say the same about India, because I think in India, I think the way, at least, I perceive it, from here, is that it probably is very region specific. I think, we've had, more flexibility from, probably South India, whereas, compared to the West, like Mumbai, etc., it's been a total, sort of a clamp down. So we've had differing experiences with the Indian supplier base, depending on where they work from.
Okay. So now let's pull back a little bit into your sector.
Sure.
What has been the impact on the global pharma sector? Things are much better than before. In the sense, during this, everybody, the one segment that hasn't changed is the health segment, because there has been an increased demand, if anything. So, obviously, because of COVID, need for some other medication is not going to go up. But in general, in the global pharma supply chain, global pharma segment, what are some of the, if any, changes you're seeing?
I think the pharmaceutical sector, the demand and consumption trends are pretty stable, right? If you look at it over a period of time, in a sense, this sector has been recession proof, and maybe to an extent as virus proof as a sector could be, right? Because as you said, the end market is defined and the end market exists, right? So clearly it's not, these are not discretionary expenses. These are medications which people like you and me need to consume irrespective of, whether the stock market goes up or goes down. So from that sense, I think the growth outlook remains intact for pharmaceuticals. Though I should mention two outliers here. I think one is the fact that there is today a lot of interest, or there's a lot of focus on trying to get drugs to market, which will help probably with the COVID-19 situation. And I think in general, probably in terms of antibiotic capability, in terms of move away from certain geographies and diversify supply chains better. So I think that is going to lead to sort of an internal rejig within the pharmaceutical industry of where you want to buy your product from. So I think that is a very interesting and a very important dynamic which is going to influence the pharmaceutical sector. And I think if you speak to decision makers in our customer base who are eventually making the finished dose, you would probably hear many of them talk about trying to risk mitigate their supply chains in a much better manner than they did maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And I think this is a dynamic which is going to play out. I don't see this as a short-term trend. I think this is a pretty fundamental change in how buyers will behave, governments will behave, consumers will behave, because they see the risk of being totally hip jointed to one geography, and they would ask that the patient population and the doctor population have more choices in terms of where they get their drug from. So I think it's going to be there's going to be a rejig. I don't see 100 becoming 200. 100 will probably become 105, 106 as it would be a steady growth. But I think the composition of the 100 would probably change, and maybe more in favor of Europe, North America, and countries who can step up. And India has an opportunity there.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think every industry goes through this in terms of you have like a sole supplier or very limited supplier or something like that. And when something like this happens, you start looking at multi-sourcing, etc. I mean, I've seen this happen in semiconductor industry. I've seen this happen in the data storage, because everybody used to have this server farm in one place, and now they have it in every continent, and just in case something happens. So I think even here, as you're saying, they could be, with this, there'll be other entrants that can come in and say, hey, let's mitigate the risk, etc. So, from that point of view, there are new opportunities that are going to come out of this. So, what are some, you think, individual sub-segments or individual entrepreneurs, for all of them, what are some areas where you feel there could be new opportunities in your area?
Yeah, sure. I think, what I feel, sitting here and really when I speak to customers and also, the public policy side, is there would definitely be opportunity for people who would, want to invest and, who would want to start an enterprise, which is based on manufacturing, right? Which is based on manufacturing of intermediates for pharmaceutical applications, intermediates for non-pharmaceutical applications, drug products for pharmaceutical applications. So I think clearly you would see an interest, and this is also going to be pull. It's not only going to be push, because the governments, I think you will see increasingly in Europe and North America that they will start to think that, hey, this is something which we need to do. And you will see governments, industry associations putting their hands up. At least I hope, they will put their hands up and say that, we are willing to, support entrepreneurs, we're willing to support industrial groups, who want to invest in manufacturing. And I think that is something, quality manufacturing, which is, completely compliant with the health regulator expectations. And I think that is something which is going to be in demand. And I think there's going to be a reset in terms of, which countries would step up to do that. And I think that will open up opportunities for people. And I think that is clearly one area which we will see more interest in. Clearly, also, I think something like contract research organizations or contract manufacturing organizations, which are able to promise a good quality of product and at the same time be competitive, will emerge. And I think countries like India probably have a really great chance. There are people stepping up in locations like Vietnam and South Korea, even within the last 5 to 6 weeks. In our industry, I can tell you that, people have started to take initiative and set up businesses, and they have found funding, and, they're, looking to either moonlight greenfield work or have taken over plants which are earlier, sort of abandoned by big pharmaceutical companies. So I think these would be opportunities which would open up, and clearly it's a trickle down effect. So when a large manufacturing plant opens up, it means the business chances improve for everybody across the supply chain. So you would have the solvent manufacturers, you would have intermediate manufacturers, you would have people who have analytical capabilities, contract analytical capabilities, or who manufacture equipment which goes into that. I think those sort of people will also start to see benefits, and I think professionals who are employed in those sectors today would see more opportunities for themselves, is what I feel. And since you asked me the question, and it's not related to my sector or business directly, but I think another area which we see, which will benefit probably, is that people will probably think a little bit more of what they consume. And I think we are seeing some very initial trends of people becoming more discerning in terms of meat consumption. And I think those sort of things, vegan substitutes, or something which is much more safer, not only for yourself but also has a positive effect on the environment. I think those would be businesses which would see interest, and not only from an economic perspective, but clearly from a ethical, environmental perspective too. So I mean, that's my short take on it.
Yeah. And also, how about, obviously we hear about, potential, cures for it from medically, as well as vaccines being developed and all that kinds of stuff. So are you part of a supply chain for it? Because obviously you talked about, many pharma companies to whom you supply, they are your customers. So are any of them the ones developing the cure for COVID? Is there anyone that you are supplying to that are actually working on it or very close to getting an approval?
Yeah, sure. I think, if you look at the landscape, there are probably 5 or 6 companies who are, ahead in this race in terms of trying to bring a cure to market and beat a vaccine or beat IV fluid. So there are 5 or 6 companies. I think a couple of them in the US, there's one in UK, there's one in Europe, there's one out of China. What's happened recently is that one of the large US companies, whom we work with, you've probably read the news, is that they have, managed to get the emergency authorization from the US FDA for use of a drug called remdesivir, which is actually an already approved drug. So it was actually developed by this company for the Ebola crisis which happened in Africa. So they're sort of repurposing this drug and sort of trying to see if it works for the COVID condition as well. And they have met with some initial success, and that's why they have an emergency authorization. So we are in fact part of that supply chain.
Yeah.
And clearly, I mean, you would appreciate that we have certain confidentiality things where they wouldn't want us to talk about it. But we are part of that supply chain, from one of our business units. And it's the number one project, which I chase up every morning to see that everything is going fine in terms of we're able to serve the customer, and then the customer is able to obviously dose it to the patient. So yes, we are playing a small role, and hopefully this comes to fruition.
Correct. So tell me a little bit about you personally, Saurabh. You've worked in the finance sector and then you moved to pharma, and maybe it's the business of pharma that you love. But just tell me a little bit about yourself, how you ended up here, and you have experienced everything from Kotak Mahindra to other companies, and so
Yeah.
how has that fed into what you're doing, and was there like a steep learning curve of learning about the pharma, what you guys manufacture, things like that?
Sure. So my basic background is I am a mechanical engineer, and then I figured that I would be no good at it, so I decided to get an MBA because I was always keen on finance and economics. So I got my MBA, and as you said, I started working in the financial services sector. So I was managing money, and I was an investor, and we used to invest on behalf of the different employers I was with. Coincidentally, I think a good part of my investing experience was in the pharmaceutical and life sciences sector, where we were evaluating opportunities.
Oh, I
And
see.
so I think that sort of gave me a segue. And when when the UQUIFA opportunity emerged, it helped firm things up faster. But I don't have I'm not a pharmacist or anything like that. But clearly learned on the business, and we've as many people do. And it was a steep learning curve, but I think we had the support of our professional managers, and my uncle as well has supported me quite a bit. So I think we were able to, as a team together, understand what strengths and weaknesses everybody has, and we've been able to move together on that basis. So clearly, I mean, it's been more learning on the job rather than anything. And I think one fact is the fact that when you're an investor, you get the chance to meet probably the smartest people in different sectors who are looking to attract and raise capital. And I think that sort of click somewhere, and you tend to pick up what's good, what's not good, and you get a very a distilling capability in terms of what's useful, what's not useful. And I think that helps in business is my observation.
Right. And also I think the business side of, be it pharma or something, it's the same business principles that hold it together. It's the same questions of who's the customer, how much are they paying, how do we cut the cost, how do we run a business it's a skill that's transferable across, sectors.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, every business needs a product needs a selling price, and it needs a volume. So the value is volume into value. So that's how it is. So I mean the principles are the same.
Correct. Now you have actually moved to Spain from India and started living there, etc. So tell us a little bit about. I mean, the only thing I realized about Spain when I was there just for a couple of days is it's extremely difficult for vegetarians to survive, and secondly, nothing starts till 10 o'clock at night. No restaurant is open. So, but maybe we have just a couple of minutes. Just tell a little bit about what is it like living there? What aspect do you really love? It's something new you've discovered, and what aspect is tough?
Right. So we moved here as a family 5 years ago, and clearly, when our initial observations were pretty much similar, we are vegetarians, so we didn't find we had the similar challenge. And restaurants did open late, but I think I mean, of course, that's the Spanish or the Latin way of living, So exactly, way of living. So I mean, we have to we come from a different culture, so we have to make the adjustment, and that's what the integration is all about. But I think I mean, this country definitely has certain positives, and I think one of the things is that I think the work ethic of people is pretty solid in terms of how and the commitment to get the things done, and that's and the level of professionalism is pretty good. And I think as a society, what we have felt as a family is that it's a pretty open society, easy to make friends, they get along well, and so I think that's helped us sort of integrate into the local fabric as well. So I think those are our observations as a young family, living here.
Great. So thank you so much for your time, and may the business grow beyond whatever it is right now, and may you be part of great solutions that are coming out. So thank you so much for telling. Actually, someone commented, Mohan, saying that it's a very informative interview. So I think it's great. I think you covered a lot of details of the pharma industry. So thank you so much for your time, Saurabh.
Thank you, Lakshmi. Thank you very much for having me.
Talk to you soon. Bye. So thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you. Bye-bye.